recorded in the beautiful mountains of British Columbia. Welcome to
Friends on Horses.
Welcome back to the podcast. Today we get to talk Liberty training and adventures with Andrea Wady of Pure Liberty. Andrea is a well-known and talented Liberty trainer, originally from the UK and now residing in Costa Rica. Andrea teaches Liberty training both from her home and all over the world. In addition to her impressive resume, Andrea, along with her colleagues, filmed an adventure where she and a friend took some horses who had minimal trust of humans and walked coast to coast across Costa Rica. You can check out the documentary Taming Wild Pura Vida on Vimeo. Thank you for agreeing to talk with us, Andrea.
You're so welcome. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
So I know Emma and I are both very curious about the Liberty work that you do. I wonder if we could just start with you just explaining a little bit about your definition of Liberty work.
Yes. So Liberty has meant many different things to me over the years. I've been with horses my whole life. I've been very blessed in that way. And Liberty came into my world probably about 15 years ago. And it's been an amazing journey. But my definition of what Liberty means has definitely changed over the years. Liberty used to mean to me, my horses stick beside me with no equipment or minimal equipment. And that's really what started the journey with even the documentary that we made, was asking the question is, am I really at liberty? You know, if I'm using treats, am I at liberty? If I'm using tools to add pressure of a consequence of the horse leaving me, am I really at liberty? And there's nothing wrong with any of those techniques. I'm not saying that. I've used them all. I may continue to use them depending on the horse, because there's always more than one way up a mountain, you know, and every horse is different. But just for my own personal development as a student of the horse, I was saying, well, what happens if I just don't use all these tools? And it came to a head for me. I had a horse at the time called Archie. He's no longer with us, unfortunately, but he was an amazing Liberty horse, massively exuberant. But I had trained him on pressure, turn and face me, stick with me. Oh, and he stuck with me like glue, and I used treats. So much fun. I would do it all again. It was so much fun. But one day I went out into the forest and I'd forgotten my training stick, my extension of my arm. And he stayed with me, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is amazing. I don't need these tools. Everything's going to be great. Well, by day 4, I had no horse beside me anymore. Like, he had figured out that I no longer had the tools. So it was very humbling, and it was a good sort of punch in the face to my ego to go, okay, I've got nothing. So I wanted to start again, and I literally started again. I downed all my tools and was like, what's going to happen now? And I realized that I actually really had nothing, and that I had to build the relationship in a whole nother way. And the definition of liberty is the freedom to do as one wants without fear of consequence. So how can you be at liberty if there is a fear of consequence? I.e., if the horse leaves you and pressure is applied for that horse to come back to you, the horse is mentally feeling that there is a consequence if they leave. That's what I wanted to explore stepping away from. Like I said, nothing wrong with it. That's what led me to Pure Liberty. My definition of liberty is the horse really can walk away and there is no consequence. They can say no and there is no consequence. That doesn't mean I don't ever ask them anything. I just have to get smarter at what I ask. And my timing and feel has to be pretty sharp.
I'm wondering, so, and full disclosure to our listeners, Andrea and I met at a conference in Florida, and I got to watch her wonderful presentation on Liberty and really her trip across Costa Rica. It was fantastic. And there were a few methods that she talked about that I thought were a whole bunch of fun that I would love you to expand on, Andrea. So things like mirroring the horse, and what are some of those tools that you use that really inspire, I guess, intrinsic motivation, that motivation from inside the horse?
Yeah, that's what I really seek, is intrinsic motivation. So one of my favorite things to do is to match the horse's feet. I watch even really experienced horse people leading a horse and their feet are all going at different times. And it just creates this little agitation in energy between you and the horse. So if you can just match their stride for stride for stride, you'll often see the horse's head will come down, their breathing will deepen, their level of relaxation gets better. And actually so does yours. And people go, yeah, but I've got a thoroughbred, he's got a really long stride. I've got the shortest legs in the world. I'm like a pit pony, but you can stretch that stride. It's actually really good for your hips. So that's good for your riding too. So that's one thing. One of the other things is looking at what the horse looks at. Notice what they notice. One of the biggest fractures I see is when horses are going, what's over there? And the people are going, don't look, don't look. It's like, you're asking your horse to be a creature that it isn't. You're asking it to not do what has kept it alive for 50 million years. So indulge the horse, look at what they're doing, look at what they see or smell or hear, and then say, okay, I see you, I see what you're looking at, now come on, I think it's fine, let's go. Otherwise we start to build this brace all the time, pulling the horses away from what they're looking at. And the more you do this and the horse realizes that you are noticing things, they start to follow your lead and go, well, if she's not bothered, then I don't need to be.
Mm-hmm. I like that. I'm thinking about what questions people might have, and I think especially with liberty training and, like, you know, really letting go of control, a lot of people are afraid that if they let their horse kind of do these things, check out what they're afraid of, move the way they need to move, that they're going to lose control. And then if they lose control, then things could become dangerous. And what happens if they lose control? And then what happens if they get an answer that they don't want to hear from their horse? And then what does that mean about them as a trainer? And, you know, it goes on and on. So, I mean, how do you address that?
Well, control is an illusion. We can't control anything unless it wants to be controlled. There is no bit or gadget or whip that is ever going to make a horse stay with you. If they really, really want to go, they're going to go. They will position you into a way and they will go. Now, you may think you have control, and you may have control for a few months until the horse escalates and escalates and escalates, and that's when you bring different trainers in. So what we start to do right from the beginning is, you don't have to change everything. Okay, you can keep doing all the things that you do, but if you want to start to explore pure liberty, so what I do is, it's not exactly like liberty training. We're not training patterns. We're building trust and friendship and connection. And from that, you can build anything. You can carry on with your dressage lessons. You can do carriage driving. You can do cross country. You don't have to ride. It doesn't matter. I want you to see it more of like a new foundation that we're building under the house that you've already built. If it's a new relationship with a horse, that's brilliant. So you can even start outside the fence. So it doesn't matter if your horse turns his back end on you, you're the other side of the fence. It doesn't matter. So you stay well within your comfort zone. I have a theory, you know, like people say learning starts outside your comfort zone. I don't believe that. I think learning starts just inside the edge of your comfort zone and you push it out from the inside. That's a much healthier, easier way to expand your comfort zone than being outside of it and being terrified and trying to scrabble back into your comfort zone. Like, nothing happens then. Your learning is finished. So if you and your horse can be just inside your own comfort zone, you can approach and retreat it, or retreat and approach, as I like to say, and you can stay outside the fence. You can step just inside the fence. So you don't have to suddenly strip away everything and go on a giant science experiment, because unless your timing and feel is good, you're probably going to run into a bit of trouble. Or your horse is going to say no, and you don't know what to do with that. But you just start very slowly. Can I stand outside the fence and watch my horse's environment for them while they graze? So they feel safe and relaxed while they're grazing. Because I tell you what, being a leader, it's not a full-time job. It's ebb and flow. We're a leader sometimes, they're a leader sometimes. And I tell you what, you would be surprised. Virtually every horse that I've worked with, even the horses that were real problem horses, I call them horses that weren't being listened to, they start to offer so much beautiful stuff when you stop trying to control them. When they go, oh, thank God you're listening now. And nearly every horse will forgive all the things we've done before. And let me tell you, I've walked the walk. I have done terrible things to horses, terrible things that I'm not proud of. I've been riding horses since I was 18 months old. So don't ever feel bad about what you've done in the past. I grew up in England. You know, I was show jumping. You were taught from 5 years old, if that horse stops, you smack it until it goes. I didn't know any different. Well, when I did put those tools down, those horses had some pretty strong opinions about me. And I had to eat a lot of humble pie, but they are so forgiving. And I have an online course, and I have a lot of students come through that go, my horse is never going to let me do any of this. And they come out the other end and they go, wow, I didn't realize they had that capacity to want to work with me now that I've relinquished control. So you don't have to be scared about that. You can work outside the fence, and then you can go and put your halter and your lead rein on and go and do all the other things that you do that you feel safe with, and then you build up to it.
I'm curious because I'm hearing you talk about just this new way of working with horses. Was it kind of trial and error that brought you to that place, or was it kind of looking at how horses communicated with one another and kind of mirroring that in your relationship with them? How did you kind of come to develop all these different ways of being with horses?
I think a lot of it, I've had some amazing teachers. I can't credit it all from falling out of the apple tree and bumping me on the head. I've had amazing mentors all the way through my horsemanship years. But I think a lot of it is just trial and error, always knowing I did a lot of natural horsemanship and I loved it. When I came from traditional show jumping and stuff, natural horsemanship felt like a breath of fresh air. And then it would make me feel uncomfortable. I'd be like, I don't really feel like all of this pressure doesn't feel right to me. What else can I do? Okay, positive reinforcement. Again, fabulous fun. Super enjoy it. Still use it with my horses today if I'm training certain behaviors. Again, I was like, I feel like there's something more than this. And I always believe that the teacher appears when you're most ready. You know, my natural horsemanship, David Lichman, amazing influence and a very dear friend to me. I trained and studied with Anna Marciniak, also amazing, using treats in training. Elsa Sinclair, who I made the movie with, amazing influence on me. But ultimately, it's the horses themselves. What I was seeing with positive reinforcement was I had an amazing connection with the horses, but I was seeing these expressions, just the slight layback of the ears, not a pinning of the ears, but just a slight sour face where I was going, this is not the softness that I'm looking for. So I would train using treats for calmness, yet I would know that I was manipulating it a little bit. I was rewarding an expression, but not really getting the feel. And then when I took the treats away, that's when I found everything I was looking for. It was like, the softness really is there. The intrinsic motivation is there. And the feel that I was looking for, I found it. So I think it's trial and error. And when everybody's different, and what's right for one person and one horse is different for other people. But the beauty with Pure Liberty is it can work with any horse, any connection, any partnership, and it doesn't matter whether you tack up and then go riding, you're going to have a softer ride. You're probably going to use your reins a little less. And that's what I really like about working in this way with horses. But ultimately it was watching for the expression on the horses and feeling that I was getting a much purer connection.
Unless Mira, you have another question about that, I feel like this could be a beautiful segue into meeting the horses that you took on your trip, and then start going on that journey with you.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit about these horses that you took coast to coast in Costa Rica.
So Elsa Sinclair and myself, Elsa Sinclair's from Taming Wild. She made the original movie. Her and I have been friends for many years, and I told her about my idea of crossing the country at Liberty with a rescue horse, and she was like, I want to do that, and let's make another Taming Wild movie. So I was like, great, the universe had a plan. So I was tasked with finding the horses in Costa Rica. Not hard to find horses that need some help anywhere in the world, actually. So I took myself to the meat market, which was the hardest day, one of the hardest days of my life. And I hope that I never have to do it again. And that's where we found Apollo. I picked Apollo because he was so smart. All the other horses in the pens were galloping around and they were frantic. And he had backed himself into a corner, put his bum in the corner, and was just watching everything. I was like, now that's a smart horse. He was very pretty. He was the right colour for filming. Who knew that you can't have certain coloured horses for filming? And it was a whole new world. I didn't know because of how it would look on the film. Like you couldn't have a grey horse, you couldn't have a black horse. So it's like, oh my goodness. So it came to bidding, and no one else was bidding on Apollo except the meat man. And I started to panic because I was thinking, why is no one else bidding on this horse? He is very, very pretty. He is very well built. He's not old. He's not wrecked. Oh dear. And I won the auction. And then a message filtered through the crowd, because whoever had bought him in had obviously seen that a woman had bought him. Costa Rican people are very lovely. And a message came through saying, don't ever try and get on that horse's back because he's incredibly dangerous. And I thought, oh, great. Well, I won't tell Elsa that because, you know, I'm sure he'll be fine. So we got him home and we were not allowed to do any training with him. You couldn't get near him, couldn't get close to him at all. But we had to get his hooves done, jabs done, and his teeth done to make sure he was healthy for filming. So we got him corralled. I worked a little bit on getting a halter on him, and obviously I was feeding him. That's all I could do. And when the equine dentist came, he said, well, no wonder he got deemed as dangerous because whoever rode him had such a large bit and such leverage that they snapped both his wolf teeth. So yes. And he had scarring on his face, scarring from the saddle. And we think he probably only got ridden twice. So it must have gone disastrously wrong, is all that I know. So I didn't tell Elsa that because I thought, well, it's too late now. He's here and I'm sure he'll be fine. And he mostly was. I mean, he was challenging, that's for sure. And then also, I do want to disclaim that Elsa is an amazing horsewoman, and we had made this deal that we weren't going to discuss the horse's pasts. And by then I was able to halter him, touch him, because I had to for medical stuff, and he hadn't shown any signs that he was going to be dangerous. He was quick and he was sharp and he was very green. So I was like, I think we'll be fine. And then Zeus, who was my partner, we found him working himself to death on a tourist trail, going up and down a mountain about 6 times a day. He was desperately underweight, terrible feet, horrendous conformation, and everyone was saying to me, what are you doing? I'm like, he has to come home with me. He has the heart of a lion, and I have fallen in love with him, and I don't care if I have to carry him across the country. That's who's coming with me. And he was lovely as well, but he had learned to control people using his body. So he would try and walk over the top of you, and he could walk at 1,000,000 miles an hour. He was very leggy. So his answer was, I'm just going to tank through everything. Whereas Apollo's answer was, I'm just going to shut down and walk so slowly that hopefully you'll get bored of me. Complete opposite horses, which was kind of cool. And then we had Mishka, who was the pack horse, the guide horse, and she came to us and she had no bad handling or baggage. And I swear, if we hadn't have had that horse, we would never have got across the country. She was so bold, and she just basically ran the whole thing for us. So that was the horses that we had. Yeah.
So you had a whole herd with you.
3, yeah, we had 3 in total. So there was Zeus was my partner, Apollo was Elsa's partner, and then one of my best friends, Liana, was leading the pack horse, Mishka, who was out in front, but she still features in the movie because she was such a character. Yeah.
So you had these 3 horses with different baggage that not all of you were aware of.
Yeah.
How did the journey start? Did you start at Liberty, and then how did trust build?
No, it started very difficultly. Well, the part of the problem was we were mostly on trails that were public. I mean, we saw very few people, but we did have a bit of motorbikes coming through and stuff like that. So we decided as safety that we were going to have a halter and lead line on from a kind of liability perspective, that if our horse had run out in front of a motorbike and caused an accident, we would have been in big trouble. So our premise was that we would use the tools only for safety. So the rope was either draped across the horse's back, or we would have the rope in our hand, but we'd keep it as loose as possible. So the clip on the back of the halter would need to stay down. If the clip was lifting, we were using pressure. Now, of course, there were times we had to. You know, if things at the beginning were just we had no connection at the beginning. All Zeus wanted to do was eat. And all that Apollo wanted to do was pin his ears and walk as slowly as possible, in the hopes that we would die along the way. I think would have been quite happy with that, as long as he kept going. So there was zero connection between any of us, and we had to earn it. We had to make really good choices and work for it. And boy, I tell you, on day 1, I was in tears. Day 3, Elsa was in tears. We thought that we had bitten off way too much. And, you know, our goal was to ride bareback and bridleless at the end on the beach on the far side of Costa Rica. And on day 3, we were like, we do not have a hope in hell at doing this. It's like, you know, this has cost a massive amount of money, of time, blood, sweat and tears, and we're screwed, basically. And then we got to sort of days 5 and 6, and we were like, okay, here we go. And yeah, it was amazing. Horses are so forgiving, and once they understood the concept of we weren't going to ask so much of them, we weren't, you know, I think the biggest mistake people make with their horses is they ask them to do what we as humans want to do, not what they are necessarily capable of. So I think that's a real fracture in relationship with a lot of people and horses, you know. So we knew that horses' DNA denotes that they can walk a good long distance each day and they're fine. Our horse's health was good. It wasn't too much of an ask. We tested that theory massively because we had no idea of the terrain that we were actually going to go across. It was way, way, way worse than we had ever imagined. And had we have known ahead, we'd never have done it. But, well, you need to see the movie to see that sometimes crisis mode can be one of the most bonding things in the world. Look what's happening right now in the world. You know, we are all turned upside down and inside out and going through pretty difficult times. Yet the bonds that it is creating between communities and people, and even nations, it's quite something. And on a very small scale, that's something that we saw as we progressed across the country, that it's very, very bonding when you have difficult times. And so we worked through the struggles of the horses not wanting to connect with us. We couldn't force it. And bit by bit, they started to trust us, and they would meet us every day going, hey, what's next? Where we go?
So for those listeners who haven't seen the film, I'm wondering if you can just kind of give us a Coles Notes of what your days looked like. I'm assuming you were camping along the way.
Yeah. It was pretty brutal. I'll be honest. There were days when, when we went through, for instance, the coffee plantations, it was so steep. It was so testing. Our mental capacity was very tested. The horses, interestingly, really didn't struggle. We did. So our days would start at about 4 o'clock in the morning. We would have to dress our feet because our feet were falling apart. We would get the hoof boots on the horses, get them fed, and we would start walking on pretty much at dawn. Invariably, we ran late because we, just did. And so we'd be leaving camp usually about 6 in the morning. My husband was driving the support truck, so he would meet us if he could. If he was able to get where we were, he would meet us usually about 3 times a day. So we were graining the horses 3 times a day across the journey to make sure they were getting their calories. Also, we needed to eat. So we would hike mostly between 15 to 22 miles a day on average. And then the boys would go ahead and set up camp for us, or we would sleep on the floor. We slept in really random places. We slept on the floor of a nightclub that they hadn't cleaned up since New Year's Eve. So there was like hats and whistles, and that was bizarre. We slept on the floor of a church, in a school, in a mushroom shed that had rats. I wouldn't do that again. So it was rough. There was no nice hotels or anything like that. It was rough. And I think probably the biggest stress at the beginning was, are we going to make camp by nightfall? That was kind of stressful, and that kind of messed up my horsemanship on the first couple of days, because I was worrying that we weren't, because we had a Costa Rican guide with us who kept us alive. He was amazing. And he was stressed on the first couple of days that we were moving too slowly. So I think I was using a bit more dominance. My version of dominance is asking a little bit with the lead rein, but that wasn't what we were wanting to do. So I didn't ever wish I wasn't doing it. And it was the best 2 weeks of my life, no doubt. And it made me realize that we can do so much more than we think we can. Even like with what's going on in the world right now, people go, I don't think I can do this. It's like, you can do so much more than you think you can. And that was something that really struck me home. And same with the horses. What I now would ask a horse has changed a lot since I did that, because they can do so much more than we think they can, and they love it because they get to use their brains.
I've got 2 questions for you out of that. I would love to hear about, first, were the were the places that you stayed in, like the nightclub and the mushroom shed, were they pre-organized, or do you knock on a door? They're pre-organized?
They were pre-organized, yes.
Okay.
Yes. We had a brilliant group called Camino de Costa Rica, and they found the route for us. And they gave me a list of places that we might be able to contact. So it's a really cool rural sort of collaboration. So we were really remote. We were in very, very remote places. And like this one town, it's not a town, it was a tiny, tiny little village. And 5 families lived in that village. And they were cooking for us. And one representative from each family came, and the 5 people all cooked together. So like it was a really cool experience. And it was able to bring a bit of money into their villages, as well as, you know, they made our food and that sort of thing. So yeah, that was all pre-planned.
That's great. And did they have spots for the horses to stay? Like,
Yes.
or were, yeah?
Yeah, so the horses stayed on a lot of football fields. We had electric fence and things with us, so we could make up corrals, but they went into people's fields, all different places. We had riverbanks, but you know, they had great places. They stayed in better places than we did, that's for sure.
I'm curious if there's any stories from your trip that really stand out for you, just any moments, favorite moments or funniest moments.
Oh, there were so many funny moments. Most of the funniest moments were when we thought they weren't filming us. That caught me out so many times. And actually, if you go on Vimeo on demand, there is a behind the scenes, and you'll see a few of those bloopers. But yes, there were a few of those where I would be like tired, and you know, I've got the very British sense of humor, which isn't always appropriate. And then I'd turn around, I'd just see the cameraman grinning, and I'd be like, oh, you were recording. So there was a few of those. There were some scary moments. I fell down a waterfall and hurt myself, which thankfully wasn't on film. And we were in a very inaccessible place, and that frightened me because I wasn't sure if I'd broken my hip. So I didn't know how they were going to get me out, but as it was, I was fine, just very, very, very bruised. And I think the best moments for me were just some of the connection moments with the horse, like the first time he asked me a distinct question, the first time he kind of touched in on me. Zeus and I had this thing where we liked to stop and look at the views. And I would actually use that in a form of positive reinforcement. You know, I would be like, hey, if we could just walk a little bit more, I reckon we could catch up that view. And we would get to the view together, and that would be our rest point. And that would be almost, you know, the, hey, view would be my bridging signal. And then we'd both get to relax, and he'd get to eat, and he'd get to look at the view. So just building that conversation, those were the moments that really stuck in my head. And the children along the way, you know, kids coming out to see us, and people being completely bemused by hoof boots. Like they'd be hearing that we were crossing the country. They weren't remotely interested in that. They just wanted to know, what on earth are those things on your horse's feet? You know, it's all the cultural experiences.
That's so cool. That's so cool. And there's so many pieces we could talk for hours on here, Andrea.
Yeah.
Like, this is wonderful. I can't wait to check this movie out. I want to hear a little bit more about you mentioned like when your horses would start, those moments when your horses would start asking you questions, and those moments when just kind of those connection pieces. And I would love to hear a little bit more of how you figured out what these horses needed, and how you figured out how to create that language with them.
Yeah, well, I mean, previous experience with other horses had definitely helped. Understanding, you know, learning theory helped. Also making massive mistakes. you know, massive mistakes. I always remember day 2. Zeus kept walking all over me, and just, I was so tired. I was so overwhelmed by the whole thing. We'd been, you know, nearly a year in planning, and here we were doing it. And it was just, I just fell apart. It was just all too much. It was far too overexciting. And I remember saying to Elsa, oh my gosh, if Zeus doesn't stop walking all over me. She just started roaring with laughter. And she's like, did you actually just say that? I was like, I know, I sound like a rookie. And she turned around and she said to me, how can he be walking all over you if you're not standing there? And it was just that aha moment of like, I know this stuff. Of course, he can't walk all over me if I am moving. You know, we get stuck in our head with natural horsemanship. He who moves the horse's feet is the leader. But once Elsa helped me unlock my own head and I got my feet moving, Zeus stopped walking all over me. And that was the whole premise of what we wanted to prove on this, through this documentary, is that movement lowers stress. And the more we move and the more our horses move, the more the connection comes, because movement lowers stress. And that works for us and it works for our horses. So I was stressed. I was becoming fixed in my movement. I was freezing. And when I got moving, my stress went down, my horse's stress went down, and vice versa. We had another moment where we were going down a hill, and Zeus was really very long in the body, and he hadn't really learned to tuck his bottom under it that time. And he would go onto the forehand downhill and just start running. And I mean, I'm talking hills like this that were shaly and red clay dried, and we were falling all over the place. Zeus was like a deer on roller skates, and I was running down the hill just feeling like my knees were going to blow out. And I was getting so frustrated, and I found myself stepping back into control, just bumping the lead rope. And I'm like, no, stop. This is exactly what I don't want to do. I need to think out of the box. Now, I'm not recommending everybody does this. It could have been dangerous. But as he started to take off down the hill, I was just like, okay, I'm going to go faster than you and run like a lunatic and zigzag all over the place. And he would just be going, whoa, lady, slow down. You're going to hurt yourself. And every time I sped up, he slowed down. And I went, oh, I can harmonize with that. And I would start to walk slower. Anytime he sped up, I'd be like, okay. And he was like, no. And we found our harmony down the hill. So I learned through thinking, I'm screwing this up. I'm making mistakes. What else can I do? Whenever I use dominance, I like to ask myself 3 things. You know, did it work? Was it necessary? And could I find another way to do it? And nearly every time on the could I find another way to do it with horses, the answer is yes. We tend to step back into dominance because it's quick and it's easy and it works. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. If you have good timing and feel, it can give really good clarity to horses and they can understand exactly what's asked of them. Equally, on the other end of the scale, it can be used to abuse animals, as can anything. But I just wanted to experiment, you know, what happens if we don't? And that's where Elsa inspires me hugely. You know, she's doing work at the moment with 2 stallions, and one of her stallions is the most damaged horse I have ever seen in my life. I mean, he was dangerous beyond belief. And she's now 2 years in, nearly, well, 1.5 years, and she can just about touch him. Her patience and looking outside of the box is so inspiring. And so we just worked our way across the country, making mistakes and finding other ways to do it. And that's how I learned the most, was reading the horse, reading the feedback, what feels good and what doesn't. And I think, you know, you've got to learn to trust yourself more. We tend to follow things very dogmatically, right? I'm doing this, you know, or I'm going to do pure liberty. But even my own students, I'm like, no, don't, you know, make your own cake, gather ingredients from everywhere and make your own flavor of cake. You know, trust your own instinct. How many times have we seen an instructor, perhaps with our horse, and we're thinking, I don't feel comfortable with this, but we don't say anything. you know, and I think that's the thing these days. It's like, you know whether something feels good to you or not. Another lady I love who makes the the Smart Pack diaries. It's like a horse agenda. Jenna Knudsen, I think her name is, and she always says, follow what feels good. And that's so true. Like, if it doesn't feel good, don't do it. And you may make your own discoveries of what works between you and your horse.
I'm curious, after this journey came to completion for you, was there any big takeaways for you that you weren't expecting?
Oh gosh, so many. I didn't want it to end. I know that much. That I would never do things with horses in the same way again. And that they are so smart that we control them way too much. And actually, the more we control them, the less they use their own cognition, and that leadership should be shared. I always knew that, but I never really lived it, I guess, or I would live it too far the other way sometimes, that I would let my horse control everything, when actually there's a middle line. And it's absolutely okay to ask things of your horse, just as it's okay for them to ask things of you. A really big take home for me is answering a horse's bid for attention. It's like when they want to touch something, go and touch it with them. Like I said before, Elsa's been hugely impactful on my horses, and she's so good at that. But also, she's really good at asking the horses to do things. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a two-way street. But we don't have to have this massive control. You really don't. But you do need to have guidance through this. If you're not experienced, I'm not suggesting that you just go out and, take all your tack off and jump on the back of your horse, of course. But they are capable of so much more. But the more we take away from them and solve every problem for them, that the horses stop using their brains. They actually lose the capacity to use their own brains.
Mm.
Are you surprised with the lessons that you learned? Did you expect to come out the other end of this having learned something more predictable? Did you have predictions for how this would go and what your takeaways would be?
No, I had no idea what was going to happen. I believed we could do it. I totally believed that we could do it. I didn't think it would be as physically challenging as it was terrain-wise. And my biggest take home was that those challenges were what cemented our relationship. And I think had we have not had those challenges, our relationships would not have been so good at the end.
That's a beautiful answer. And how about telling us a little bit more about some of the terrain?
So the hardest part was going through the indigenous land, which has no particular roads. It was horrendous. I never would have taken a horse through there had I have known. It was brutal. It really, really was, to the point where I questioned whether we were doing the right thing, but we couldn't go back. The horses had not one scratch on them. Elsa and I and Leanna were falling over virtually continuously, and I'm really quite balanced, so that was a shocker to me. And the horses just plowed past us through the mud. They were not stressed by it at all. And that's when I really realized how much our horses can do. It's in their DNA. People go, yeah, but our horses aren't wild horses. Yes, they are. We are a blink of an eye when it comes to, the development of horses. Horses have been around in some form for millions and millions of years, and we are just a little blip. So it doesn't take much to awaken what they know they can do with their own bodies. And, they didn't want to stop. When it got to the last day, that was the biggest thing I noticed was it was hard for them when it was over, because they went out came back to my farm, and they were on 90 acres and they walked the fence line because they just wanted to travel. They would have done it for the rest of their lives. I have no doubt about it.
And that leads into my next question is, can you tell us a little bit about where the horses are now and what they're up to?
Yes. So this is going to be harder for me. So Apollo is with Liana. We keep our horses together on the 90 acres. So Apollo is Liana's partner, because obviously Elsa couldn't take him back to America. So Mishka and Apollo stayed with Liana in our herd. So they are doing amazing. And then Zeus came home with me, and sadly 2 weeks after we'd got back, he got bitten by a snake and ultimately passed away. So that was brutal and not the ending we were looking for. And I have never felt so cheated by God and the universe in my life, because I was like, you found me this horse and we had this amazing adventure, and then you took him away from me. But so yeah, that was a tough one. But it is what it is. He fought like a lion for about 3 days, but ultimately we were not able to save him. But yeah, not what we were hoping for, that's for sure. So we dedicated the movie to him, and I'm out teaching all the lessons that he taught me, and I swear he comes with me on every clinic that I go to. But yeah, it was heartbreaking. I can't deny that. It was absolutely heartbreaking. But I'm so glad that we had that adventure and that he knew what it was like to be loved before he passed away. But yeah, I would have liked it to have ended differently.
I'm terribly sorry, Andrea.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it was horrible. But there we are. It is what it is.
I was going to ask you about your transition and your crew's transition to normalcy after the event.
It was so hard. It was so hard. I mean, at first it was wonderful. Our bodies needed to rest, and we slept and slept. And Elsa and I had this joke, because we ended in the middle of February. And we were like, so this was last year. So we kind of joked, at what point do we go back to a normal diet? Because we were just like, well, obviously we're so fit and skinny now, we can just eat anything. So we got to mid-May and we were like, no, we probably should slow down with our eating now. But yeah, it was the freedom that we felt while we were out there was so amazing. And I want to touch on as well is just the bonding of the three women. It was super empowering, and how each of us were on our own journeys, but you know, I don't want it to sound cliche, but we bonded so strongly, and it was so amazing to see how we all let each other struggle a bit, because we had to, but we were all completely there for each other. And luckily none of our bad days all coincided on the same day, because everyone had tough days. And doing that journey with those two women was just one of the best things. And the reason I did it was to be able to look back on it and always have those memories. And that's what I always say to people: go out and make memories, go out and challenge yourself, and don't be afraid to fail. And I mean, I will have a lifelong friendship with those girls, because no one else knows what it was like to go through what we did. And we came out different people. Absolutely.
Amazing. And that kind of experience, it's a make or break for friendships.
Definitely.
And then to come out the other side and feel like you bonded over that. What a special, unique thing to have between the three of you.
Definitely. I think what was made it easiest was nobody moaned. Didn't matter how hard it got. We cried a bit, not because it got hard, just emotions, you know. we didn't cry that much, but there were days when all of us struggled a little bit, but we never moaned. And I think that was the main thing. We knew individually that we were all going to get along, but you still do wonder, you think, gosh, I hope we do. And what was beautiful was watching each other progress and the connections progress with the horses and celebrating each other's wins. You know, there's so much in this world when you get stuck into the social media and all that, where people are just tearing each other down. And, you know, I just don't ever want a part of that. And so being able to be on this trip and everyone building each other up was just amazing. It was really, they really inspired me, those girls.
Sounds like you were just incredibly supportive of each other in all of those moments.
Cool. Yeah, it was cool. And we laughed a lot. We laughed at each other, with each other. You know, it was amazing. I would do it again in a heartbeat. I would.
What is some of the, I guess what I'm asking is, where are these women coming from and what kind of experience are they bringing to the table? You talked a little bit about that already, but yeah.
Well, Elsa had done the first movie, Taming Wild, which I massively recommend you watching, where she'd taken a wild Mustang and given herself a year of working with no tools, so no treats, no equipment, nothing. The horse was on her farm, and would she be able to ride it? And it's a beautiful, beautiful film. So I always knew that with Elsa, it was going to be an amazing learning experience and a great adventure. Leanna originated in Idaho, and we met in Costa Rica, and she's super gung-ho. She's cycled to Nicaragua. She's climbed mountains in Peru. She's done amazing things. So I never worried about Leanna. I knew that she would be amazing out front, leading us across things. So yeah, I mean, we were careful. A lot of people wanted to join the crew, of course, but we couldn't take too many people. My husband's a brilliant organizer, so he had, you know, the whole crew, and we had Elsa's boyfriend, who was amazing, and our cameraman as well, who had to walk the whole way with us, and our guide Orlando, who I think if we didn't have him along, we'd still be out there somewhere, I think, lost. So the whole team worked together amazingly.
Can I ask, and feel free if this is giving away some secret, we don't feel like you have to talk about it, but did you end up riding these horses?
Yes. Yes. In varying degrees is what I'm going to say. Yeah, we rode very little. Actually, we rode very little. We really enjoyed the hiking. And I mean, after that, like, I feel like we invented a new sport. I mean, the horse hiking is so bonding and so much fun. But you really need to watch the film because it develops. You'll see how it develops through there. But yes, we did ride them in varying degrees, is what I'll say.
That's so exciting. Mira, we're going to have a movie night, hey?
We are going to have a movie night.
Yes.
I'm curious, you kind of alluded to it a little bit, but are there any other projects that kind of, you know, were born out of this trip? Are the three of you going to come back together again for another trip?
I would love to do that. And, you know, it won't be for a few years. Elsa's very busy doing her film. Since that, I've developed my online course through CRK training. So I've been really busy with that. Leanna's super busy. So we definitely have said, you know, that we were thinking on my 50th, we might go off on a big adventure and do something. So that's a couple of years away yet, but we will definitely come and do something. Elsa and I have been together. She's from San Juan Islands. Not far from you guys, actually, I think. So I've been up there, and we will definitely do something together. Our friendship is very deep, and I love her dearly, and we will do some more adventures. But yeah, at the moment, she has her hands full. It's really worth looking up, actually, what she's doing right now. And you guys should for sure have her on as a guest. The work she's doing with the stallions right now is amazing.
We'll get her information from you and maybe hit her up at the end of this.
Yeah.
Can you tell people where they can find your well, you said CRK training, where they can find your online course and the video?
Yeah, so the online course is great at the moment. If you're stuck at home, you can work through that. And actually, they have just opened up. Normally, it's only open once a year in September, the online course, but people are stuck at home. So we've opened it up at the moment, and it's the full Pure Liberty program. You know, I don't want to do a sales pitch or anything, but it's definitely worth taking a look at, and you can follow the whole program through with your horse and have one-on-one with me as well. And that's it, CRK training. I would have to find the link. Maybe you can post it underneath at some point. But yeah, I mean, I learned a lot and I think that's the thing everyone needs to remember. If people go, oh, I did this, but I didn't like it. Great, that's still learning. Learning what you don't want to do with your horse is equally as important as learning what you do want to do. But the way I look at it is you can never have too much relationship. You can never have too much connection. And, you know, the big backbone of the course is about learning to read the micro signals on horses. And at first you think, that ear didn't mean anything, or that wrinkle nose didn't mean anything. It's like pretty much everything means something. And the more we can learn to read our horses and be more aware of our own body language, our own rhythm, our own way of being around horses, being calmer around horses, it just builds a better connection. So then when you do go and ride, or you do whatever it is, in hand, you know, work, whatever, you're going to have a better connection. I call it the Liberty mindset. Just because you're using tools, it doesn't mean that you don't have to be at liberty in your head. And then if you keep the principles in mind, you will use those tools less. You know, I see a lot when I'm out teaching clinics, people will come in with their horse, because we work one-on-one, and I'll guide them through, and they'll have an amazing connection at liberty. And then they put the halter on and the horse is dragging them everywhere, or they're dragging their horse everywhere. And I'm like, no, like, let's still work at liberty. You know, the mere thing of matching your horse's feet means that you and your horse are moving at the same speed, so you don't have to be pulling on the lead rope. You'll notice your lead rope is looser. Just little things like that.
Wonderful. I'll make sure that I post up when we release this video, kind of any of the internet links and such, for when this horrible coronavirus is finished. If people want to if people want to get a hold of you for clinics in the future, do they go through your website, or do you have an email they can contact you with?
Yeah, they can go through the website. So I'm supposed to be on tour in America in 2 weeks' time, which of course is now not happening. So we're rescheduling potentially to September, October. But obviously that's open to being flexible. But hopefully I will be in the States, maybe in BC, and around that time. But yes, I'm normally in America around sort of May or June, or September, October, or certainly North America. And I am usually in England around now, sort of June, coming on June, July. But again, with this going on at the moment, who knows? But hopefully this time next year this will all be a distant memory, I hope. But the nice thing with online study is you can do this work while we're on lockdown, and then, you know, practice with your horse if you're able to get to your horse, and if not, then it'll give you some connection to be working on.
Well, thank you so much. It's just been such an incredibly inspiring conversation. I have to admit, I'm sitting here just itching to get out to the paddock now and hang out with my horse. So thank you. Just what an incredible journey, and just so much learning. I so appreciate you taking the time to be with us.
Oh, you are so welcome. And, I say to everyone, give Liberty a go. It's not just, pure Liberty is not just sitting watching your horse or matching your feet. There are very distinctive parts of it. Like you can ask your horse to go, you can ask your horse to follow you, stop, breathe out, and it will lead ultimately, if that's your goal, all the way up to bridleless riding. So yeah, get inspired, get out there, try and work on the relationship with your horse, and you will be amazed what those horses will offer you.
Fantastic. Oh, I'm so thrilled. And now I'm seeing Mira and I riding off into the sunset, tackless, and I'm already planning a trip across Canada for next year.
Well, and that's the thing, you can plan adventures. A group of students around here recently, what they did is they worked out they were all about 10 miles away from each other. So they went together from farm to farm. And it was a 3-day adventure. You could do a 3-hour adventure, but build it up. If your horse struggles with being away from each other, can you even just go to the end of the lane and back? Set your goals. Don't overface yourself. You don't have to cross a country like we did, although I recommend it. It was so much fun. But, just challenge yourself and your horse.
Wonderful. I think that Mira, I feel like that's a great, inspiring spot to end. How are you feeling?
That feels great. Thank you so, so much.
You are so welcome. Thank you for having me.
Okay, well, that's a wrap, I think.
That's a wrap.
Stay safe, everybody.
If you want more Friends on Horses, you can find us on Facebook at Friends on Horses Podcast.
Check it out for all the latest and greatest horsey news.
You can find us on the web at friendsonhorsespodcast.com
or Instagram at friendsonhorses_podcast.
Like what you hear? Help us quit our hay jobs by supporting Friends on Horses. You can support us by rating our episodes on iTunes,
becoming an ongoing sponsor through Patreon,
or simply by spreading the word about our show.
Have some feedback?
We'd love to hear from you.
Contact us via email at friendsonhorses@gmail.com.
Thanks for joining us.
Until next time.